Next up, we're going to start with Chapter 2, The Rise of Greek Civilization. The chapter begins by stressing the importance of the ancient Greeks to the history of Western civilization. Although Greek civilization was centered in the land surrounding the Aegean Sea, the Greeks spread their culture throughout the Mediterranean area and even into the Black Sea region, coming into direct contact with the older civilizations of the Near East. For Greek civilization, the Bronze Age, from about 2900 to 1150 BCE, was centered in two regions, on the island of Crete and on the mainland of Greece itself. The people of Crete were not Greek, but had a great influence on early Greece. Our knowledge of civilization on Crete, labeled Minoan by its primary excavator, Sir Arthur Evans, depends primarily on archaeological evidence obtained at Knossos and a few other sites in central and eastern Crete. The palace complex at Knossos is an intricate structure, labyrinth in nature, but without defensive walls. The evidence reveals a secure, optimistic society whose painted pottery was widely admired and exported. Three distinct kinds of writing preserved on clay tablets have added to our knowledge of Minoan civilization. Most important are Linear A, which is still undeciphered, and Linear B, which was shown to be an early form of Greek. The tablets reveal a civilization ruled by a king with an extensive bureaucracy. Moreover, the use of the Greek language shows that in its last years, Crete was ruled by invaders from the mainland. The civilization on the mainland, which flourished from about 1400 to 1200, was centered in the city of Mycenaean and is also called Mycenaean. The Mycenaeans, in contrast to the Minoans, were more warlike and constructed strong defensive walls. This was a wealthy society that traded with Crete and the eastern Mediterranean. The Mycenaean Greeks probably plundered Troy about 1250 BCE, a war that Homer immortalized in his poems. Between 1200 and 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean world was shaken and destroyed by a catastrophe, traditionally attributed to an invasion by a northern people, the Dorians. Greece then entered into a period of decline called the Greek Middle Ages, from about 1100 to 800 BCE. The epic poems of Homer, although written about 750 BCE, depict the world of the 9th and 10th centuries in the earlier Mycenaean world. Homer's epics provide us with a unique perspective into Greek life, including insight into the government, the social classes, and the code of values. Men were respected for courage and their sense of family honor, and women, like Homer's Penelope, were honored for beauty and faithfulness. The isolation and relative calm of the Middle Ages allowed the development of a unique Greek institution. The polis began to emerge between 800 and 750 BCE. Usually translated as city-state, it was generally a small independent political unit and was thought of by its citizens as a community of relatives rather than an impersonal state. With the advent of the polis, a new military technique, the hoplite phalanx, was developed. This close formation of heavily armed infantrymen depended on the discipline, strength, and courage of each soldier. The polis and phalanx emerged together and heralded the decline of kings. By about 750 BCE, the Greek polis responded to population pressure by sending out colonies throughout the Mediterranean. These polis retained only nominal ties with the motherland, but such colonization encouraged trade and industry. The colonies adopted various forms of government, but several eventually fell to tyranny. A tyrant was not necessarily bad for a polis, he simply assumed the dominant position in the polis extra-legally. By the end of the 6th century, however, tyrants had been driven from all the cities of Greece, and the most talented and active citizens were generally encouraged to take a full part in the life of the polis. The two major states, Sparta and Athens, received close treatment. At first, Sparta was not strikingly different from other Greek polis, but beginning in about 725 BCE, the Spartans remedied population pressure not by colonizing, but rather by invading neighboring Mycenaean and enslaving its inhabitants. These slaves, who outnumbered the Spartan perhaps 10 to 1, were called helots. Their existence, coupled with war against Argos about 650 BCE, changed forever the nature of the Spartan polis. The Spartans chose to introduce fundamental reforms attributed to the legendary Lycurgus that turned their city into a military academy and camp. The chapter goes on to explain in detail the strict Spartan codes of discipline, ethics, and education. The Spartan government was an unusual mixture of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. The state was headed by 2 kings who commanded the armies, a council of elders, a steering committee of 5 ephors who were elected annually, and an assembly of citizens, over 30 years of age, who ratified or rejected decisions of the ephors. The Spartan government was admired for its checks, balances, and stability, much like we see in modern American government today. Eventually, Sparta became head of a Peloponnesian League, which by 500 BCE included every Peloponnesian state but Argos. Such an alliance gave Sparta security from extreme attack, but the constant threat of a Helot rebellion necessitated a conservative foreign policy. Sparta generally preferred not to get involved with affairs of other Greek and foreign states. The city-state of Athens developed quite differently from Sparta. In the 7th century, Athens was a typical aristocratic polis whose nobles served first as magistrates, or archons, and then on the governing council, or the Areopagus. Towards the end of the century, quarrels within the nobility resulted in bloodshed. Draco's law code of 621 strengthened the hand of the state against the local power of the nobles. A more serious problem was Athens' agrarian crisis. By planting wheat as a staple crop every year, Athenian farmers exhausted their land and were forced to borrow from wealthy neighbors, pledging first their land and then themselves and their families as collateral. As a result of many defaults, several formerly free farmers were enslaved and some were even sold abroad. The poor demanded the abolition of debt and the redistribution of land. In 594, the Athenians elected Solon as sole archon with extraordinary powers to remedy the problems. Solon canceled his current debts and freed the debt slaves. His reforms included a division of the citizenry into 4 classes based on wealth, a new council to serve as a check on the Areopagus, and a popular court. He also encouraged the cultivation of a cash crop, olive oil, and fostered the growth of trade and industry. Solon's efforts, however, were only temporarily successful. By 546, a tyrant named Pisistratus had achieved power in the state. Pisistratus succeeded in increasing the number of the nobles, or the power of the nobles. These tyrants maintained the institution of Solon's government, were beneficial to the state, and were very well liked for the most part. In 510, however, rival nobles succeeded, with the help of a Spartan army, in driving out the tyrants. With great popular support, Clisthenes succeeded in overcoming his political opponents and established a democracy, government run by the people. This democracy eliminated many of the old regional rivalries and required that each citizen contribute his time and energy to the governance of the state, including fighting in the military and serving on juries. Clisthenes also created a new council of 500 and encouraged free and open debate in the assembly. Because his successes would give Athens an even more open and popular government, Clisthenes can be called the founder of Athenian democracy. The chapter goes on to discuss the social structure of the period from about 750 to 500 BCE. Special attention is given to Hesiod, works and days, and his depiction of peasant life, and to the aristocratic values as presented by the symposium and athletic contests. An overview of Greek religion is provided that emphasizes its importance as a unifying factor among the Greeks. While the Olympian gods offered Greeks little comfort or transcendent hope, Greeks also turned to other deities and rites, including the cult of Apollo, the cult of Dionysus, and the Orphic cult. The great changes of the Archaic age were also reflected in the poetry. The lyric style, encouraging personal expression, predominated. In the late 6th century, Greece not only faced foreign ideas, but also the threat of foreign conquest. The Persian Empire had been created by Cyrus the Great in the mid-6th century. His successors invaded Greece after Athens aided a rebellion in Ionia in 499 BCE. The Greeks repelled two invasions by the Persians in 490 and 480 BCE and succeeded in defending their homeland and lifestyle. The stage was set for the achievements of classical Greece. I hope that these short little introductions prove helpful as you read the chapter and study its material. We'll be looking forward to chapter 3 coming up next.